What coupe should you buy? Well, in front of me is the facelifted 2021 Mercedes E-Class Coupe, and I'm not all that convinced that it's any better than the one it replaces. Let's talk about it. My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. So for starters, you've obviously got the facelifted headlights, which I kinda like. I don't necessarily prefer them over the older car, but I do think they look more muscular, more aggressive. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, as I'd really like to know your thoughts. Anyway, engine. This is the E300, meaning it has a very similar 2-litre petrol engine to the previous E300. However, there are some pretty sizable changes. One being that this car is now fitted with the EQ boost system as standard. That's a 14 horsepower electric motor mounted between the engine and gearbox that helps start the engine and gives you a little extra kick when you need it. Then there's the engine itself. It's a more modern, slightly more potent 2-litre unit. Instead of 245 horsepower like the old car, it now has 258 ponies under the bonnet. That combined with the electric motor should make it noticeably quicker then, right? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's do the 30 to 70 sprint. Well, they weren't lying about the power then. We managed a time of just 5.56 seconds, over half a second quicker than the pre-facelifted car. Quite impressive when you consider this newer E300 weighs 90 kilos more as well. Anyway, time for the interior, as this is where they may have evolved a little bit backwards. The first obvious change is the steering wheel. Whether it's any good or not, we'll see in a minute, but it's now fully touch sensitive, so I'll let you make an assumption on where that one's going to go. There's also no longer a scroll wheel, just a touchpad, and the wood trim is now slightly different in shade. Nice. Moving to the back, you've still got a proper amount of legroom and headroom for an adult, which is nice, but the lack of armrest is a bit of a shame. The amount of room is the main thing for me though. Not many coupes can comfortably sit an adult in the back. Now, the boot, it's got a lot of space, but it could still be better, I think. No 12-volt socket and only one shopping hook. Clearly, this is a car made for a single person's weekly shop. Then, if you do have longer items, you can fold the seats down with this neat little lever, but unfortunately, you still have to climb into the nether to push the seats themselves down, which is a bit of a shame. At least you still get the infamous Mercedes shopping basket though. Yay! Anyway, tour over, let's get driving.
Okay, so obviously the main big change is the steering wheel, and I'm going to be honest, so far I'm preferring the older one. The old one was already fairly difficult to use, especially for new users, but you could get used to it. This one, why is it so fat? Why is every manufacturer just making their wheels thicker and thicker? Like, eventually you're going to have like bare hands to just like actually grab onto the thing. However, one thing I am noticing that is better than the previous car is the suspension. Now, I can't find exactly how they've tuned it compared to the old one, but it is definitely a bit more refined. The review of the Mercedes E450 I did especially, I noticed that it was just a little bit too floaty. By the way, if you want to see that review, I'll put a link up in the top right hand corner. But if you want to stay and see the facelifted E-Class, you're welcome to. Now, in terms of driving around town, obviously the steering is fairly light, even though it's a big fat wheel. You've got the dynamic steering, which is similar to like Audi, BMW. It's kind of like a very quick rack that changes as you change speed. So as you go faster, it becomes slightly less responsive. Just so you don't end up jerking the wheel when you're going 70 miles an hour and putting the thing into a tree. But at low speeds, it's a bit more responsive. So when you're turning around corners, you only have to give it like half lock before you actually start turning around at a pretty sharp bend, which is nice. Then yeah, as I said, suspension feels a lot less floaty than the Mercedes E450 review that I did, even the older E300s as well. It just feels a lot more composed already. Very Audi-like, actually. which is a very good thing. And then seats are just, they're so good in the Mercedes E-Class Coupe. They hug you properly, they're nice and big, they're comfy, and the seating position is just à point. It is perfect. Really, really good. You can get nice and low, you feel like sitting in the car rather than on it, and yeah, your elbows touch the armrests. It's just bang on. Anyway, parking this car has the 360 camera because it's a fairly high specification car, and they have actually updated the UI of this very slightly. So when you've got a 360 camera, you have a very wide angle, of course, reverse camera with lines telling you where you're going to go, and you have this new overhead camera. You've got all-round parking sensors, and they've updated the UI, so they're like kind of a little bit more accurate. So if I zoom in just a little bit with my head, you can see it's like, instead of coming up with individual dots, it comes up with like this sort of wave of parking sensors, which I actually quite like. Then, this being touchscreen, you can change and have a look if you're next to a curb or anything. Then you got your front camera as well, so if you're coming out of a junction, you've got a hedge next to you, you can actually have a look from your front bumper and you can see if there's oncoming cars. So like, imagine if that was an oncoming car. It's pretty neat, really. It's a very good system. Now then, once you are parked, this is where the E-Class is a bit of a nightmare sometimes, especially if you live in a big city, because you have these gargantuan sized coupe doors, which even to the first notch, a lot of the times you're going to end up hitting people's doors, so you do have to be very careful with this thing. But I think the pros still outweigh the cons just about. A C-Class is easier to live with, but this is just so much nicer to drive. It feels like almost like an S-Class, which is very nice. The only thing I did notice with previous cars is that the sound deadening was not quite as good as I thought it was, so hopefully they've changed it for this facelift and made it more in between the C-Class and the S-Class, as before it was definitely closer to the C-Class in terms of just refinement. Anyway, of course we've got the EQ boost system now, so it should start the engine very quickly coming out of junction. So if I give it half throttle, yep, it's fairly nippy, shall I say. But there is still a bit of a delay, which I wasn't expecting. BMW's mild hybrid system does seem to be just a bit smoother to engage. This is definitely a bit more jerky, which is a bit of a shame. And that's interesting because it's actually got 3 more horsepower than the BMW system does. But the one thing you notice is once you're moving, the engine stays at quite a low RPM, but if you just give it a quarter throttle, you still get just enough acceleration for like daily driving, to a point where the car's not having to downshift through like multiple gears, so you do get that kind of instant little bit of acceleration, which is nice. Anyway, let's reset the trip computer now and see what kind of MPG we can get on the motorway. According to Mercedes, this will do about 42 MPG on the combined cycle, which is actually worse than the older car, and that's because it's 90 kilos heavier. Yeah, those EQ boost things have to go somewhere in the car, and unfortunately they do add basically another big bloke into the interior, which is a bit of a shame. So yeah, fuel economy is a bit worse, even though it's now got a mild hybrid system. But yeah, anyway, before we get on the motorway, let's do the usual. Take it round a roundabout, have a little taste of the handling of this thing, and see if we can get it a little bit sideways. Okay, I have got the ESP menu up. I'm not going to show you how to do it because it takes forever. Anyway, let's go into Sports Plus. That should hopefully keep the engine on, get the gearbox into a better setting, and then switch the ESP off again because it decides to turn it on when you change drive modes. Anyway, let's see what we can do. Okay, so we got a good amount of power, and it's a cold day, so there is not much grip. Also, you'll notice that you get a lot of fake sound, which is actually quite a welcome addition because this 4-cylinder doesn't sound particularly good inside or out. Then gearbox, you got the 9-speed G-tronic, which is about, fast enough, I'd say. It's all right. The S-tronic gearbox in Audis is definitely a bit better. But you do have 9 speeds, so it's got more speeds to go through. Anyway, into Eco now. Let's see what kind of MPG we can get on the motorway. And actually see what this car is like on the motorway as well. Because this is a big comfy barge after all. Most of your time driving this thing is going to be on a motorway, right? So then, in Eco, coming onto the motorway, tickle the throttle. This is where the EQ boost system really helps. Because now the engine's in its Eco map, so it does deaden the throttle a little bit, and you do notice the turbocharger takes a little bit longer to come in. It's just trying to save every ounce of fuel. But because you have that electric system, it does mean you're not sort of waiting for boost to come in, which is very nice. So it does drive a bit better than the previous car. Like especially there, like quarter throttle, and this car is really pulling. It's very nice actually. Straight up to 70. Now then, let's get our cruise control on. This is always quite a fun thing with this new steering wheel. So press set here, 70 miles an hour, yes. And then you can either slide it to decrease speed, or you can press it up and down for, I think, larger increments. Yeah. So if you want to go by 5 mile per hour increments, you can, and you just press the button, and that's fine. But if you want to go up 1 mile an hour, you have to slide your finger, which is, yeah, it's not great. I'll be honest. It's a bit of a faff to use. But yeah, once you are on the motorway, suspension very well calibrated. They definitely made a couple of changes over the previous car. Doesn't have any of that wallowing around that the previous car did. It's just very settled. Going over bigger bumps, don't notice it whatsoever. And then the smaller undulations, there's much less of a thump coming into the cabin. It's just really, really nice and quiet. But still, wind noise is a bit of a problem for this car. So yes, it is better than a C-Class, but it's still quite far away from being anywhere near as good as a Mercedes S-Class. I do think they need to put a bit of effort into making it like a proper halfway house car, because it certainly is in terms of price. But the wind noise is only about 10% less than the Mercedes C-Class, which, you know, isn't brilliant. Like the S-Class is still in a totally different league compared to this thing in terms of refinement. But suspension-wise, they are actually quite close. Just dive into this corner, see what it's like under braking. Oh yeah. Suspension is definitely much better. Almost zero body roll, which is nice to see. Anyway, let's now get onto the motorway and see if we can hit 42 miles per gallon. Alrighty then, well, we managed 36 miles per gallon, which ain't that great really, all things considered. However, I have had to cut the journey short just a little bit because the M40 today is absolutely chocker, apparently. So, over a longer run, you would indeed get about 40 miles per gallon out of this thing, which is quite impressive, really. You know, I'd be happy with that in a big barge like this. And yeah, so it's not going to hurt the bank too much. If you are doing a lot of motorway miles though, it might be worth just going with the E220 or maybe the E300DE. But yeah, anyway, let's get onto a B road now and have some proper fun. Okay, into Sports Plus then. Sharpens everything up a bit, including the steering, makes it a little bit heavier. One thing you notice is that it doesn't feel super directly connected, which is interesting. You can get a bit of a wobble on quite easily. Now then, let's get the ESP back off. Obviously, come on, go down. Oh, for goodness sake. See, this is what I mean about these touch bloomin' controls on the steering wheel. Absolute pain in the neck to use. Anyway, let's have a little taste of this thing then. Yeah, a little bit sideways, but the traction control still doing its thing. And one thing you can't deny is that the performance is certainly there. Like, for a 2-litre engine, yeah, pretty impressive. Gear shift paddles are fairly nice to use as well, not the best in the world. And brakes, Mercedes always make very nice brakes. Sorry if you can hear anything in the back moving around. A lot of stuff back there. Alright, let's have a little flavour of the sound. I mean, it's there. You can hear stuff. And steering is... it's there, shall I say. Not a huge amount of grip from the rear end though. It does let go fairly quickly, and I'm guessing that's because it's just quite a heavy car. But you know, the actual balance of the chassis is quite nice. It still feels like it's got a kind of sports car setup, but it's just got quite soft suspension. But it's certainly stiffer than the pre-facelift car. That was very boaty indeed. Like, coming round here is very nice. That guy definitely just cut me off. Fake noise sounds quite nice. I mean, I know people hate fake noise, but I do think if the engine doesn't sound good by itself, it's quite nice to just embellish it, as long as you're not going like crazy where it's just really obviously fake. Then I don't think most people are going to care that much. I think it's just journalists that really dislike it just because they know it's there. Yeah, as soon as you get above 3,000, this thing's a bit of a rocket ship actually. And yeah, you can kind of like play with it a bit. It's got plenty of torque to get the rear end out, that's for sure. Fantastic car. You know, I've got a smile on my face, so you can't knock it really. Even above 60, you can feel the rear end squirming around. I think it is like 0 degrees today, so it's not like icy, but it is just damp and cold. But yeah, handling wise, very predictable. You know, it's still soft in terms of suspension, but it's predictable and it's safe. You know, that's all you really need. One thing I've noticed as well is when you're coming out of a little slide like that, it does just settle a bit better than the previous car did. The previous car kind of wallowed back to the other side and wanted to drift in the other direction, whereas this doesn't do that. So yeah, I mean, you can have a little bit of fun with it, but yeah, you're not going to be going to any drifting events in this thing. It's just, you know, a little bit of fun, a little bit of tyre slip, that's all it is. Now then, the previous car did fall apart a bit down a tighter British B road. Hopefully, with this slightly more refined suspension, this car will be a bit better. There's only one way to find out though. Let's go to a B road now and have a look. Okay then, let's see how this big barge handles down a little road like this. Get it into manual first, that'd be a good start. And can I place it where I want it? Pretty much. It's a little bit icy down this road, so I do have to be a tad careful today. But yeah, suspension definitely a bit better. It does control its mass a little bit better than the previous car. Tuck it in, very nice. Be gentle with the throttle. Yep, that's why. But yeah, it's very predictable. You know where the limit of grip is going to be. Okay, can we hit 60 before the corner? Let's go. Bit of wheel spin. Lots of wheel spin. And yes, we can, just about. Ooh. It's a bit all over the place. Do you know what? It's got just the right amount of performance, I think. Any more power and it would be, well, undrivable, but this amount of power is very nice indeed. It's just, you can get a nice flow on, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, very nice. Right, one last time, let's go. Oh, a bit more wheel spin. It's a bit silly, this thing. You can really drive it on the throttle though, I'll give it that. But yeah, suspension, definitely an improvement. Steering is... it's just okay. Nothing really to write home about. Brakes, very nice. Throttle pedal, really easy to modulate. Very little to complain about. You can feel the weight a little bit though, but that is because it's designed to be a comfy car at the end of the day. And I suppose that brings us to the conclusion. Should you upgrade from your already very nice Mercedes E-Class into a facelifted car, or should you pick this over the previous generation car? Well, a lot of it comes down to personal preference, but I'll give you my personal preference, and that is no. Mainly because of the thing that's right in front of me, and that is the steering wheel. It's just worse. I mean, I don't really know how to describe it, but it is just worse than the previous steering wheel. The previous one had more physical buttons that were just a bit more intuitive, a bit easier to use. And yeah, I think it actually looked a bit nicer than this one. This one does look a bit more futuristic, I will give it that. But it's just a bit harder to use. The rest of the UI is fairly similar. It does just look a little bit fresher. But yeah, I would just go with a slightly nicer, probably better spec, older version. Unless you particularly want the facelifted headlights. Overall though, is this a very good coupe? Yes it is, mainly because you still have the B-pillarless windows, which is just awesome. They look so cool. Still an absolute chopper, this thing. It does look wicked, doesn't it? And it's just a cool car, really. There's not many other coupes out there that are kind of like this. In a market where they're like a little bit more affordable, you're not spending like 60, 70 grand on something. Yeah, I think it does have its place, and the fuel economy isn't awful to a point where it's going to absolutely destroy your wallet, unless you do a lot of B-road driving. I'm sitting at 22.8 now, which is no bueno. But yeah, if you drive this thing normally, it's a fantastic cruiser, and one I think many people should aspire to own. Anyway, as usual, if you like this content, give it a like, and why not subscribe, as not only can you watch more content like this, you can see everything we have for sale, which should still include this very swish Mercedes E-Class. Anyway, my name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.